Hey everybody. So today I'm going to be talking about how to set yourself up for success with bug bounty programs. These are kind of they've been around for at least the past decade or so. A lot of major companies have them. A lot of smaller companies are starting to get into it. So I wanted to share my experiences with helping companies start up and manage bug bounty programs. So let's get on with it. So for me and my background. My name is Lawler. I'm not actually Bigfoot, unfortunately. I've had about 8+ years in application security. I've had 4+ years working in bug bounty space, and this is my first talk, so I might be nervous as hell. So apologies for any nervousness here. So moving on. So you've decided to start a bug bounty program. First question you should be asking yourself is why? Why are you starting this? I feel like a lot of companies these days don't really take the time to really ask themselves this question. What are you really hoping to get out of it? Are you trying to act cool? Did your CISO pressure you into starting one up? These are the questions you really should be asking yourself. What you should be really doing is you should be starting a bug bounty because you want to, and because you want to open up your platform to the security researchers that are already poking around in here anyways. You want to make sure that they can report stuff safely and legally. That's really the main point of running a bug bounty program. And the other question you want to ask yourself is, are you actually ready for one? That's another big question. I think mostly small companies don't really ask themselves. Do you have a budget for it? Do you have the headcount that can help manage it? I would honestly suggest, at least 2 engineers full-time working on your bug bounty program, usually a senior and a junior resource. I say junior resource mostly because it helps them kind of get a handle on your platform and your different applications that you're running. So yeah, so moving on. So building out the program, if you've decided to start it, are you going to go public for right off the bat, or are you going to stay private? I would usually suggest going private first. It kind of helps you get a little bit ready for it in a lot better way. Public, it's basically drinking water from a fire hose. It can be very nasty, and you can get overwhelmed very quickly. And I would advise against that, especially for smaller companies who haven't had too much time to kind of focus on security as they're building out their brand new applications. Next question you want to ask yourself is figuring out your scope. Do you want to have a wide open scope, or are you just opening up everything, kind of just going ahead with everything that you have on the internet? Or do you want to focus on a more smaller scope? Smaller scope, you can usually control things a little bit better, but you will still get reports for stuff that's not within that scope. So you better be prepared for it. With wide open scope, again, you're going to probably end up seeing a lot of stuff that you didn't realize was pointing towards the internet, which is a huge, huge problem. I've definitely seen companies get completely destroyed within the first 24 hours or so with dev environments and things like that they didn't realize were out in the wild. I've also seen things like JBoss admin pages that are using default credentials that are for some reason hooked into the main everything in the back end, which is a huge problem. So as far as rewards and things like that, you definitely want to make sure you have a pretty decently sized pool of money just from the get-go. And I feel like a lot of companies kind of miss the mark on here. You don't want to start off with something like 5,000 or something low like that. You'll quickly run out of money, and you really don't want the researchers kind of waiting around, waiting for you to kind of get the budget for it. One of the things I've noticed with some companies is that when they first start out, it's usually sometime in the middle or end of the year, they've already had their security budget, sectioned off earlier in the year. And they can't get more money. And that's a huge problem, because then you end up with researchers, that reported amazing stuff, good vulnerabilities, but you're unable to pay them, which can be a huge problem. It leaves a bad taste in their mouth, and it means that they're less likely to continue looking into your applications and things like that. Another key thing here too is, everybody's running pen tests, everybody's running DAS and SAS scanners. You definitely want to make sure that if you have known issues, if you're using a vendor, you definitely want to upload those to the platform. If you're not using a vendor, you definitely want to make sure you know where those are living, be it in Jira or some other ticketing system. And you definitely want to look into, finally getting them to start fixing stuff. Especially, you don't want to have something, SQL injection that's been sitting there for 2+ years that hasn't been fixed. You don't want a researcher to find that, and then you have them get duped out just because you already knew about it. That also leaves a bad taste in most researchers' mouths. And can cause problems. Again, they're less likely to look into your stuff, which can be a problem, especially if they're talented individuals. Building out the program is probably one of the harder parts, just because figuring out scope. Do you want to go public? Do you want to go private? Making sure you have a decent sized reward pool, that can be a challenge. I've definitely worked with some companies where they were just unable to get the money, and it causes a huge headache, and then researchers just sitting around waiting for the money. And then honestly, this is really the best time to start getting your shit together, especially with known issues and stuff that's just been kind of lingering there, and engineering teams haven't really been fixing stuff. Budget, resources, etc. What have you. So yeah, so this is the biggest step. This is one of the more challenging steps, and you definitely want to focus on this quite a bit. So moving on. So the submissions, the submissions themselves, when you start getting submissions that coming in or into your program, you definitely want to have some sort of a process in place for where these end up living. If it's a valid submission, you definitely want to make sure that that they're not just sitting in some vendor's platform or sitting in somebody's email. You definitely want to make sure that they're in some sort of a ticketing system. You just want to make sure that they have some place to live. You also want to make sure that when something comes in that's a high threat or severity, you definitely want to have a process in place to make sure that that actually gets fixed in a timely fashion. Like I said previously with SQL injection, RCE and stuff like that, you don't want that stuff sitting around for 3+ years. I've definitely seen some companies let that sit around, which is very problematic, and I'm not sure exactly why they do. But yeah, because the other thing too with that is if you got a ton of high severity issues that people are reporting in, they're duplicates and things like that, researchers start to question that quite a bit. And they're wondering why you're just sitting on this stuff and not really fixing it, which can cause a huge problem. And let me tell you, the researchers do talk, so it will definitely come up on Twitter or potentially elsewhere, which you definitely don't want, because then that becomes a huge PR nightmare. I know it was talked about earlier in the opening talk, but internal SLAs, it can be definitely a challenge to get people on board with this, but it's something you definitely want to use you definitely want to use the bug bounty program as ammunition to try to get these in place. Again, you don't want stuff to linger, and you want to make sure that issues are actually getting fixed in a timely fashion, because researchers will definitely follow up with you on a lot of these different issues and things like that. Communication, you don't want to leave them hanging. There's definitely been times where stuff will come in, and the problem is you'll say, hey, we're going to follow up with you next week, and then next week comes and you don't respond to them. Times can get tough. You run out of time. Sometimes you forget about things and stuff like that, but you definitely don't want to leave them hanging. You definitely want to talk to them. Make sure that you're still thinking about it. Make sure that you guys are still moving forward with it, especially if you're looking into some issue, to make sure that it's not intended. Just make sure you're following up. That's one of the biggest things. And lastly, you definitely want to make sure you're rewarding on time. That's very key here. You just still want to make sure that you investigate the issues fully, but you still want to make sure that you're rewarding issues as fast as possible, which is very key here. Because a lot of researchers nowadays, this is their full-time job, and they have budgets, they have families, they have bills to pay and things like that. They want to make sure that they're getting paid on time. So especially if you're using a vendor too, they cut out a lot of the crap, because sometimes you'll get a lot of duplicates, things like that. So hopefully you're only getting the stuff that you actually should be focusing on. So yeah, submissions, very important part here. Definitely want to focus on this. And yeah, so let's talk about the researchers themselves. First impressions matter. You definitely don't want to give them a bad first impression, because that means that they're less likely to come back, especially if they're reporting quality stuff. I've seen some clients, did they just immediately shut stuff down? They say, no, this is an issue, etc., things like that. Researcher comes back, says, yes, it is, gives them, even further proof, further evidence for the issue itself. And, then it's just a back and forth nightmare. That's something you really want to avoid, especially, if this is the first time you're running a bounty program. I would definitely advise providing bonuses for well-written reports, even if it's not a high severity issue or anything like that. You definitely want to provide, something like $50, $100, whatever. That stays in their mind, and they definitely will come back, and they'll definitely keep looking. If you're, kind of giving them bonuses and things like that, it's always really good to kind of provide that for good behavior. Also, when they're being friendly, nice, not flying into rage, things like that. When it comes to solid work too, if a researcher is providing really great reports and things like that, you definitely want to provide bonuses for that. Building relationships, I've definitely seen this quite a bit, and it's great to see. There's a lot of really great researchers out there, and you definitely want to, keep them in mind for new bounty programs. You want to make them feel valued by your organization. If you're running a public program and you've got private programs for like specific apps and things like that, it's definitely good to, make sure that they're first on the invite list. You definitely want to talk to them. You definitely want to, have friendly conversation with them in the submissions itself. You don't necessarily need to, become best friends with them outside, but just making sure you're talking to them, making sure you treat them like a person is absolutely great. And honestly, be honest. That's another thing too, that I see come up a lot. Yeah, you don't really want to downplay threat and severity of reported issues and things like that. Um, you just make sure you're being honest with them, because I have seen times where a client hasn't been honest with the researcher, and then the researcher just comes back and just absolutely destroys, what they thought the threat and severity was. Granted, they probably should have included that in the first place, but they felt that their initial report was definitely good. So yeah, and then so to go along with that, being honest, just provide information. If something's not an issue, tell them why. You don't need to go super into specifics of why it's not, but definitely give them a valid reason for why it's not an issue. Might be business acceptable risk, something like that. Give them just information on why. And don't be shy about giving them details for the details about their issues and something like that. Um, so yeah, honestly, providing information is great. It makes them feel like they're being talked to. It makes them feel like you're actually discussing with them and stuff like that, which is really good thing to have and kind of go along with. And then so now you've got your bug bounty program started up. Just honestly keep it up. Just keep talking. Just keep doing all the key things that I talked previously. Whenever you add new targets, it's always great to see. You start seeing a lot more activity when you do that. And then I've also seen some clients add special bonuses for certain things, based off of certain targets. If you're looking for something very specific, definitely add that into the brief and stuff like that. And last but not least, make sure you're fixing your issues. That's one of the biggest things. That's always a headache, is when people aren't fixing their issues, which I know can be a challenge, but it's something that you definitely want to focus on. And so I know that was kind of fast, but that's the end. So let me see. Do we got any questions? What if it really is an issue? I've had a researcher refuse to accept the quiz. Yeah, that's always the tricky part. You're always going to end up having those types of researchers reporting to your program. It's a really difficult thing. Especially if you're using a vendor, you definitely want them to kind of handle that communication. It kind of goes off a little bit better. You definitely want to at least have the first talks. But yeah. So the problem with so how do you handle if someone does an account takeover on one of your customers? That's a huge issue. We always tell researchers to never hack outside of whatever the box is that's being detailed in the brief. But somebody will always end up doing that. Honestly, I've definitely had clients just straight up not pay out and tell them exactly why. But that's really not cool to do. And you should, at least, I would say, definitely make it very clear in your brief that if you touch anything, with customers or any sort of live data and things like that, that they won't qualify for a bounty. How would you discourage it? Make sure it's in the brief and just don't pay out. Just make it very clear. That's honestly the best. That's honestly the best way I've seen it be handled. It does come up. I could go into great length on some of the shittier parts of bug bounty programs. And yeah, definitely, you could definitely ban them from the program as well. Do you have any advice? Leadership support. That's always one of the hard. That's always one of the kind of the challenging things. What you definitely want to do is you want to kind of show them, if you're getting stuff in, say you have like a security email address or anything like that. If you're getting quality stuff that comes in, definitely show them what you're seeing to make sure that that's coming in. So hopefully that'll help get leadership support on your side. That can always be a challenge. Honestly, I've seen a lot of companies where leadership is actually the ones pressuring the AppSec team into getting a bug bounty program started up when they absolutely cannot with any resources. Who's the most successful bug bounty researcher you've personally seen, either best bugs or most best rewards? That would definitely be Reese Elsmore. He's definitely one of the best I've ever seen in person. I've seen him work at multiple bug bashes in person, and it's absolutely awesome to see him go to work. He's probably earned the most I've seen at those. How do you help leadership fully understand the potential repercussions work if they wanted to do a bug bounty program? That's always a tricky thing. I would probably take a look at what you kind of currently have in the pipeline as far as like security vulnerabilities that you found via, you know, other means and stuff like that. And if that stuff's not getting fixed, definitely try to use that as leverage to say, this is why we can't get a bug bounty program set up, because we're not even fixing things right now. So, you know, how do you expect us to fix things, you know, when we actually do a bug bounty program? That's been the best way I've seen with the way that works.